First, I think the Biden administration, and this is in their interim guidance, still has a tendency to place multilateralism, transnationalism above sovereignty, right? A sense that these are big challenges happening. They are unfolding sort of amorphously. Everything from pandemics to climate to cyber to digital. So I think a different view of that is that states are behind all of those things. States push those things. These are not amorphous developments. These are developments pushed by states for varying reasons who have different agendas. They don't just happen or unfold. A sense that these are big challenges happening. They are unfolding sort of amorphously. Everything from pandemics to climate to cyber to digital. So I think a different view of that is that states are behind all of those things. States push those things. These are not amorphous developments. These are developments pushed by states for varying reasons who have different agendas. They don't just happen or unfold.
How dare you?
So you are a firm believer that if a vaccine comes quickly, we are not resorting back to the world we were in. You see this is a disruption which has changed the behavior of people. This has changed, you said, e-commerce, that is changing payments, that is changing how corporations are working. And you see it as an opportunity to guide that change forward, to push on some of the longer-term reforms, which we have been looking at before as part of the globalization, arriving of AI, but also in terms of that we need to tackle climate change. So you're an optimist that this is actually an opportunity which we can take. And it's not going to be an opportunity, at least in Europe, which we are going to miss out on.
That is absolutely correct, yes. Well, you know me, I'm an optimist by character, and it's a fact that we cannot let a bad crisis go to waste, and that we have to take every opportunity to transform our society in order to tackle some of the issues that had been around, because pandemic is operating as an accelerator of many phenomena that we had. It's a fact that we cannot let a bad crisis go to waste, and that we have to take every opportunity to transform our society in order to tackle some of the issues that had been around, because pandemic is operating as an accelerator of many phenomena that we had.
But it could also potentially challenge the role of banks in our financial ecosystem and potentially crowd out private payment solutions. So we are carefully exploring the benefits, risks, and operational challenges of introducing a digital currency. But this is high on the agenda. We need to promote and embed a financial architecture that is fit for the challenges of tomorrow, and that helps accelerate the transition towards a more digital and more green euro area economy. It is a challenge. It would be easy to revert back to our turf, behind our borders, and to assume that life will continue as it was. We cannot let a good crisis go to waste. We have to use it to be stronger the day after.
We have been very active, also actively involved in the vaccine itself. We don't know yet, for example, is one dose sufficient? Do you need 2 doses? In what interval? Do you have even to be vaccinated every year? So people assume we are just going back to the good old world which we had, and everything will be normal again in how we are used to normal, in the old-fashioned. This is, let's say, fiction. It will not happen. The cut which we have now is much too strong in order not to leave traces. So this is really a test case were for the capability of global cooperation. Now is the historical moment, the time, not only to fight severe virus, but to shape the system.
We have a unique but rapidly shrinking window of opportunity to learn lessons and reset ourselves on a more sustainable path. It is an opportunity we have never had before and may never have again. So we must use all the levers we have at our disposal, knowing that each and every one of us has a vital role to play.
Now is the time to think what history would say about this crisis. And now is the time for all of us to define our own role. What is it that would make it so that history would look at this crisis as the great opportunity for reset?
The Great Reset is a welcome recognition that this human tragedy must be a wake-up call. It is imperative that we reimagine, rebuild, redesign, reinvigorate and rebalance our world. Rebalancing investment, harnessing science and technology, and advancing the transition to net zero emissions, all elements of the Great Reset, are fundamental to building the future we need.
The world's problems fit on three sides of a triangle. It's one versus many, man versus nature, and the unfortunate foundation is long-term versus short-term.
We had already income inequality that was fueling income, race, gender inequality. We have a climate emergency, which we can't walk away from. There's no doubt that the very survival of the human race requires us to act.
Any recovery stimulus should have green conditions attached to it. Energy prices should reflect real costs.
You need private sector capital, private sector ingenuity, private sector technology, and private sector capabilities to come to the party. You need enormous trust between the private sector and the public sector for this to actually work.
We have to change our economy dramatically in the next 20 or 30 years, and the next 10 years is absolutely decisive.
The recovery has to be greener than any of the previous recoveries. And in order to do that, we need to ensure that the stimulus package, including fiscal and monetary, are much greener than they were before. So we cannot waste this opportunity to ensure that the very precious money that's raised from the next generation is spent on green and low carbon.
We will now start a quite high number of task forces to look at all the different issues, and we will present all those ideas to the people assembled in Davos. But at the same time, we will make Davos very different, very open, to ensure that we do not fall back to old recipes, but that we really look at forward-oriented solutions.
Young entrepreneurs, especially from developing countries that are there and can see the right problem, can really step up and create solutions.
Finding profitable solutions to problems of the people and the planet, and we're starting to see firms move to that, and we're seeing firms that behave responsibly in that way actually doing better on conventional measures of profitability and doing better in this particular period.
We've also seen social entrepreneurs step in incredible ways. Not only has it exposed the precarious reality, but then it has also exposed the opportunity to recenter the reset around the most vulnerable and those on the edge, where it only takes something like a pandemic or difficult circumstances to slide into poverty.
And then we need to couple that with new initiatives to equip more people with the digital skills they'll need, not just to have a tech job, but a job that is increasingly tech-enabled in almost every part of the economy. If we can empower consumers with all of this, I think we unleash this next generation to have a much broader impact more quickly.
We can never again allow our health, education, care systems to be underfunded.
We need our imagination here. Possible is being redefined each and every day right now. So the next time someone tells us that tackling climate change is either too costly or too difficult, I think we need to remind them and remind ourselves of what just is happening right now.
We not only have to demand change, but also create change.
We have to live up to the expectations which we have created, and we will do so.
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before. I think America as a whole in 1973 and 1974, not just my view, but obviously the administration, missed the opportunity to deal with the energy crisis that was before us. For a long time, our entire energy policy came down to cheap oil. This is an opportunity, what used to be long-term problems, be they in the healthcare area, energy area, education area, fiscal area, tax area, regulatory reform area, things that we had postponed for too long that were long-term are now immediate and must be dealt with. And this crisis provides the opportunity for us, as I would say, the opportunity to do things that you could not do before. The good news, I suppose, if you want to see a silver lining, is the problems are big enough that they lend themselves to ideas from both parties for the solution.
I wanted to start with the response to the pandemic. I mean, you've thought, I think, more than pretty much anybody about pandemics. You've warned about them for years. You've advised countries to prepare for them. Has this response been better or worse than you expected?
Well, certainly we didn't get ready. We didn't run the simulations to realize, okay, getting testing up quickly would be important. So we failed before it came along. Well, certainly we didn't get ready. We didn't run the simulations.
On October 18th last year, Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, in partnership with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the World Economic Forum, conducted a pandemic simulation exercise. Named Event 201, the exercise simulated the outbreak of a novel coronavirus, modeled largely on SARS, with no known vaccines. From bats to pigs to people, the hypothetical pathogen was assumed to be efficiently transmissible with mild symptoms in a community. Event 201 was run by the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security in partnership with the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It invited people from business, government and public health to simulate coordinating a policy response to a theoretical pandemic. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation cited several partnerships and contributions to pandemic preparedness that had increased since the 2014-15 Ebola outbreak. Among them, the foundation stated it has supported efforts to bring more coordination and transparency to international collaboration on pandemic preparedness through other platforms, including the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board, GMBP, and the Johns Hopkins University Center for Health Security. Needed to be said that Bill Gates has been vocal in the past about the threat a global pandemic poses to human civilization. In a March 2015 TED Talk, Gates argued, saying that if we start now, we can be ready for the next epidemic. During a Vox interview in May that year, Gates also said that the Ebola epidemic showed me that we are not ready for a serious epidemic. In a February 28 article for the New England Journal of Medicine, Gates wrote, saying, "In the past week, COVID-19 has started behaving a lot like the once-in-a-century pathogen we've been worried about. I hope it's not that bad, but we should assume it will be until we know otherwise." While the event didn't predict the current coronavirus pandemic, it did point out how unprepared the world was to control such disease. This was the purpose of the roundtable exercise. After the event ended, the organizers released a document of recommendations explaining how these conclusions would require collaborative efforts between governments, international organizations and global business, as these further decisions would reduce long-term effects and consequences of a global emergency.
Well, certainly we didn't get ready. We didn't run the simulations to realize, okay, getting testing up quickly would be important. So we failed before it came along. So that day we sat there in early March and said, okay, no one comes to the foundation offices, and they haven't been since. You know, we were talking with Microsoft about it, and they did the same thing. I remember thinking, gosh, I wish we did practice for this.
I remember thinking, gosh,
I wish we'd practice for this.
Because it's such a novel idea.
The
Event 201 scenario is fictional. Today's scenario is going to simulate meetings of a multi-stakeholder group called the Pandemic Emergency Board.
We're at the start of what's looking like it will be a severe pandemic. We're at the start of what's looking like it will be a severe pandemic. And there are problems emerging that can only be solved by global business and governments working together.
There's been some conspiracy theories that are around about the potential that pharmaceutical companies or the UN have released this for their own benefit.
And maybe this is a time for us to showcase some cases where we are able to bring forward some bad actors and leave it before the courts to decide whether they have actually spread some fake news.
A new coronavirus. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia.
In related news, a significant demand for personal protective equipment like N95 masks and gloves are on the rise. Patients are overwhelming healthcare facilities. People are avoiding public spaces out of fear of infection and in compliance with public health recommendations. Our U.S. affiliate has just released polling results on public expectations for a vaccine, and 65% of those polled are eager to take the vaccine, even if it's experimental.
I am not optimistic about having a vaccine in time to be relevant during this pandemic.
With enough money and political will, anything is possible.
Penalties have been put in place for spreading harmful falsehoods, including arrests.
If the solution means controlling and reducing access to information, I think it's the right choice.
What exactly are the risks and benefits of staying home from work? Absolutely, we need to save lives, but we literally cannot afford a heavy-handed response that suffocates our economy.
The world saw large-scale protests and in some places riots. This led to violent crackdowns in some countries and even martial law. The public lost trust in their respective administration. Economists say the economic turmoil caused by such a pandemic will last for years. The societal impacts, the loss of faith in government, the distrust of news, and the breakdown of social cohesion could last even longer. We have to ask, did this need to be so bad?
I remember thinking, gosh, I wish we'd practice for this because it's such a novel idea. And then once it hit, we also made some mistakes. So once it hit, we also made some mistakes. So overall, I'd say the response has been less good than I expected. Less good than I expected. The damage economically and health-wise has been far greater than I would have expected with a virus like this. Well, certainly we didn't get ready. We didn't run the simulations to realize, okay, getting testing up quickly would be important. So we failed before it came along. I remember thinking, gosh, I wish we'd practice for this because it's such a novel idea.
If someone had said to you in December that by April, millions of people all over the world would be infected with a mysterious new virus that has no vaccine, you'd think they were talking about a Hollywood script. It's happened so fast, it almost doesn't seem real.
Breaking developments in the coronavirus pandemic. The death toll rising in the U.S., more than 60 dead.
Doctors on the front lines in Italy with an ominous warning tonight, calling this the apocalypse and telling the world to get ready.
Well, most of us have never lived through anything like this.
No one is immune to the COVID-19 virus. It threatens all of us.
Now imagine a world where mass outbreaks of deadly diseases are commonplace. Well, it sounds scary, but that might not be too far off. The World Health Organization has warned in a BBC interview that we're entering a new phase where such a reality is, quote, a new normal.
As the coronavirus pandemic brings life across the country to a grinding halt, Americans are facing a new normal.
It is a new normal that we all have to get used to.
I know a big question, Tom, from a lot of New Yorkers. When might we ever get back to normal? The governor talked today about working toward a new normal.
So we're going to a different place
which is a new normal.
This morning, almost 40 million Californians waking up to a new normal.
Social distancing at schools and businesses.
You may be having dinner with a waiter wearing gloves, maybe a face mask, dinner where the menu is disposable, where your temperature is checked before you walk in.
A new normal that will hopefully allow America to reopen.
And looking forward into this next phase of reopening and establishing some kind of new normal.
Embrace the new normals of social distancing and sheltering in place, all the physical isolation.
Now masks are becoming the new normal.
What do you think? Can schools operate under social distancing guidelines? And is that what they're going to potentially have to do as the new normal?
When we get out of the sort of new normal and get to a new normal.
Just trying to cope with the new normal. This is the new normal.
Imagining or reimagining what society is going to look like when they reopen. If you want to go to a restaurant, you're going to have your temperature taken before you're allowed inside to dine. So that's just possibly going to be the new normal that we see down the road.
Adjust our lives and get ready for the new normal.
This new normal is going to look very, very different.
A stepwise return to not normal, but a new normal.
Long lines for food becoming a new normal.
The communities return to normal, or the new normal, on what that may be.
The coronavirus pandemic has meant not only online classes, but having to watch their job and internship offers go down the drain. So what is the new normal like for the class of COVID-19?
There will be a new normal. We just don't know what that new normal is yet.
So a return to normal as we knew it is not on the cards in the near future. And it is really important that I am upfront with you right now about that. What we will be seeking to do is find a new normal.
Get out of the lockdown and return to what will, by the way, be a new normal. It's not going to be the normal we experienced before the virus took hold.
Can I say this is likely to be the new norm?
We will be having to live in a new normal, as we were trying to say, with this virus.
We keep talking about this is the new normal. I'm just curious, when can we expect life to go back to the true normal? You know, when is this expected to peak? Do you guys have some sort of timeline or estimate in mind? Or
So, as I have repeatedly said, this is our new normal.
If we are going to be able to move ahead into our new normal, we will find our new normal in the coming weeks.
To make sure that we can do everything we can to flatten the curve so that we can return not to the old normal, but to a new normal that allows us to function more and more openly as a society.
We can continue to improve how we work and play in this new normal. All of us should be able to name all the people we've been in close contact with over the last 2 weeks as a new normal.
Get New Brunswick back to the new normal.
Because that really is going to be part of our new normal moving forward. So these are all elements of our new normal.
We will transition into the new normal.
What we consider normal before COVID-19 is still a long way from returning.
Our lives are changing and about to change in a very significant way. But the thing that we called normal, our old normal, was just the new normal for people who are older than us. And this new normal that is so shocking for all of us is just the normal of future generations. I don't mean future generations 50 years from now. I mean people who are born 5 years from now.
The best hope of getting back to normal as soon as possible is never getting ahead of where we are right now.
So it's not going to be returned to normal. People will have to realize this is not going to go away anytime soon, and we're going to have to keep this up. If you think that this is going to be going back to normal in July, think again.
This will be the new normal until a vaccine is developed.
What it's going to take for all of us to be able to return to normal.
The only thing that will really allow life as we once knew it to resume is a vaccine.
It won't go back to normal in some very rapid fashion.
Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates has continued the fight against coronavirus, investing billions of dollars on the construction of factories working to develop a COVID-19 vaccine.
And it won't be normal until we get an amazing vaccine to the entire world.
And I know that we are all eager to get back to work and get back to normal. But the reality is, we have to remember that until we find a vaccine for this terrible virus, until we have that vaccine, letting our guard down means potentially exposing millions of our people to the virus. The hard fact is, until we find a vaccine, going back to normal means putting lives at risk.
Until we get almost everybody vaccinated globally, we still won't be fully back to normal.
It means zero tolerance. So every time we see a case, we basically pounce on it. We do everything we can then to shut it down and to eliminate it when it arises. And we will have to keep doing that on an ongoing basis. And yes, until a vaccine arises.
You know, it's so important to get not just hundreds of millions, but literally billions of those vaccines, because this is a global problem.
We can anticipate that we will continue like this for some time until an effective vaccine is widely available.
We want to get into this semi-normal phase as soon as we can, and then the vaccine is the thing that will change things.
I think even after we're through this first wave, we will need to remain vigilant, and we will need to bring in different measures. Normality, as it was before, will not come back full on until we get a vaccine for this. And as you say, that could be a very long way off.
Obviously, we continue to work on the vaccines, but the vaccines have to be down the road by probably 14, 15, 16 months. We're doing great on the vaccines. I think Johnson & Johnson is leading, seems to be leading in terms of the studies.
So March 2017 in the White House. In both of those two meetings, he asked me if vaccines weren't a bad thing, because he was considering a commission to look into ill effects of vaccines, and somebody, his name is Robert Kennedy Jr., was advising him that vaccines were causing bad things, and I said, no, that's a dead end. That would be a bad thing. Don't do that.
When will we get back to some sort of normal? What do you think it will take?
Well, Dr. Fauci is my hero, just so you know.
Will we truly get back to normal in this country before there's an actual vaccine that's available to everybody? How do you start lifting the restrictions safely?
Yeah, well, John, if back to normal means acting like there never was a coronavirus problem, I don't think that's going to happen until we do have a situation where you can completely protect the population.
Like large public gatherings may not resume until broad vaccination has taken place.
The way we go back to the way we were before is going to take time. We won't be completely safe until we have a vaccine.
Into whatever semblance of normalcy the new normal will provide over the course of the next few months, as we all look forward to the moment where we have herd immunity and or a vaccine.
The problem many school administrators have is that they can't give a guarantee to parents right now that their kids would be safe going back into the classroom. And until there's a vaccine and testing, they're making plans instead to continue remote learning.
All of this while the world awaits a vaccine and faces the reality that even with one, our lives will never be the same.
Legislative amendments that would make vaccinations mandatory for public school students unless they have a medical exemption. Religious and philosophical exemptions would no longer be allowed.
A lot of it depends on having a vaccine, and that's what's going to protect us the most.
We need to start thinking about what our new normal will look like over the coming months. With no vaccine for this virus likely to be available for a year or more to protect the population, we need to protect each other.
This could easily go on a couple of years, waxing and waning.
Dr. Peter Hotez is a vaccine scientist at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston. He believes governments need a strategy for how daily life will operate for the next 2 years. Yes, 2 years. That's the length of time it could take to develop, test, and distribute a vaccine once the surge in cases is over. Dr. Ali Muqdad worked to develop the pandemic models used by the White House.
So until we have a vaccine, our definition of normal should be totally different what normal is.
Almost every expert agrees a vaccine is the fastest, safest way to get our world back, even if it means a year or more of waiting. Until that happens, we're stuck in a cat and mouse game with something that can't be seen or detected until it's too late.
The thing that'll get us back to the world that we had before coronavirus is the vaccine and getting that out to all 7 billion people. Well, I think everyone's life is completely disrupted. You know, your normal pattern of go to meetings, watch sports events. This thing, in my lifetime, this is the most dramatic thing. I still find it shocking how tough it is, and how hard it's going to be to get back to the normal life that we had before.
Do you think things will go back to normal, or is that all changed?
No, once you have a safe and effective vaccine and get that out to almost all of the people on the planet, and build the preparatory systems for the next pandemic, so you can nip it in the bud, we will go back to normal and economies will recover.
In the long run, the exit from this is going to be one of two things, ideally, one of which is a highly effective vaccine, and there are a variety of ways vaccines can be deployed. They can be deployed for damping down epidemics, they can be deployed to protect vulnerable people.
We're living very, very different lives until there's a vaccine.
However, this doesn't mean we will go back to normal.
We are not going to be back to normal until we have a vaccine. I've just got to be straight with the people of Idaho.
Because the virus in one form or another will be with us for a long time until there's a vaccine, at least.
The coronavirus.
What we want to do is be able to prevent the disease, and the way to do that is through a vaccination.
Now, until we have a COVID-19 vaccine, workplaces are going to look much different.
The virus still remains and will remain until doctors and medical experts find an approved treatment and develop a vaccine.
If folks get out of this finally one day and we begin to open things up, or then finally get to a place where the vaccine can completely open up.
There will be no normalcy as we knew it in the past until we have a vaccine or herd immunity.
The vaccine is critical because until you have that, things aren't really going to be normal. They can open up to some degree, but the risk of a rebound will be there until we have very broad vaccination.
Because I talked to Bill Gates the other day, and he was saying that it could be June before anybody is having any sense of normalcy. And I don't even know what normalcy means. I mean, normalcy is, we're not going to be normal again for a long time.
No, we're not until we have herd immunity or vaccine. I mean, here's what the new normal may look like. Every establishment you go to, you've got a mask on, your temperature is taken. When you walk into that establishment, it has half the number of aisles that it used to have. If it's a restaurant or a bar, half as many seats than it used to have. Your waiter may come over with gloves. You may have a menu that's disposable. There is nothing normal about that until we get the kind of therapeutics and ultimately get to the herd immunity.
I'm struck, Bill, by when you were talking about the phases, the semi-normal phase that you spoke of, that sounded like months and months of that. If a vaccine is still not until 2021, that's many, many months of this new normal.
That's right. It's almost certainly over a year where large public gatherings likely won't be taking place. We're likely to be using masks. Even in restaurants, there'll be some degree of spacing.
If we do not have a vaccine, can I sit next to somebody in a movie theater? Can I go to a basketball game?
It depends whether the virus is spreading in your community. If it is, no basketball games. No way.
The Prime Minister has said previously that he doesn't think Canada will be able to return to full normalcy until there is a vaccine.
On the issue of the vaccine, which you've said in the past could take a year to 18 months, will we have to wait for a vaccine to hug our family and friends who are outside of our bubble?
When will there be a vaccine? How do you see that?
So we're going to have to take something that usually takes 5 or 6 years and get it done in 18 months. There is an approach called an RNA vaccine that people like Moderna, CureVac, and several others have that looks quite promising.
This is where an RNA vaccine comes in.
which becomes possible when you have the virus's genetic sequence and you know which genes code for which proteins.
So the concept of an RNA vaccine is, let's inject the RNA molecule that encodes for the spike protein.
It's making your cell do the work of creating this viral protein that is going to be recognized by your immune system and trigger the development of these antibodies.
It's a relatively new, unproven technology, and there's still no example of an RNA vaccine that's been deployed worldwide in the way that we need for the coronavirus.
The advantage of the RNA vaccine is that it can be produced within a matter of days. So these types of vaccines are much faster to generate.
I'm the first person in the United States to receive the experimental coronavirus vaccine.
I was the second person to enter into a COVID-19 trial vaccination.
Eventually, what we'll have to have is certificates of who's a recovered person, who's a vaccinated person, because you don't want people moving around the world where you'll have some countries that won't have it under control. Sadly, you don't want to completely block off the ability for those, people to go there and come back and move around. So eventually there will be sort of this digital immunity proof that will help facilitate the global reopening up.
Meet the RFID microchip. This tiny chip, which can be implanted into your wrist, yes, I did say wrist, uses short-range radio frequency identification, similar to the tech used to track your pets or your phone. Once implanted in your body, it could identify you as you pass through the airport, open the door to your home. It could even be used to buy groceries at the supermarket. Now, your driver's license, passport, keys, and wallet are all inside your body, contained in something the size of a grain of rice.
A lot of people are wondering when things are going to return to some semblance of normalcy, but let's talk about what that might actually look like.
You talk about returning to some semblance of normal. What are we saying that looks like? I mean, you mentioned keeping up social distancing. What could life look like, say, 6 months, a year from now?
Apple and Google announced new technology that could help. Phones ping other phones around them with their location. People who contract the virus report their diagnosis to the app, and anyone who came close to them is notified.
In Hangzhou, to enter a tower block, you need to have your temperature taken and registered. And you must have an app on your phone into which you input your name, temperature, recent travel, and ID number. The information generates a color code.
In Hangzhou, to go out of the community or to public activities, you need to have a green code. This green, yellow, or red code is automatically decided through the system. It uses big data to decide whether you've been to affected districts or come into contact with those people.
But what if you're well and get a red code anyway? This man says he self-isolated while visiting Anhui province near Wuhan and back home in Shanghai. But there's no way to challenge the technology.
Our office building here, you need to register. You need to show the code to demonstrate that you're healthy. So when I was red, there was no way I could go to the office and work. I didn't do anything. Then after 2 or 3 days, I looked and suddenly it was green. I don't know why, but I think that although it's not really reasonable, it is still a preventative measure.
But few know exactly how their data is being used.
We actually looked at the back-end code that the app was running, and what you could see is the moment that a user gives it permission to access data, it immediately sends a function that says report info and location to police. And then we looked into it, and the police were a key developer of the product as well. And so from that you can tell that the data is basically being sent back to the police the moment somebody actually uses the app.
The Australian Department of Defence has selected Dragonfly to integrate and commercialize its breakthrough detection technology. This technology can, from a distance, determine fever, which is much different than determining just temperature, cough detection, respiratory rate, heart rate, and blood pressure. So what this detection technology can do is help establish a global early warning system for infectious and respiratory diseases.
A team of researchers say the U.S. could have to endure social distancing for 2 more years unless a coronavirus vaccine becomes available. The Harvard School of Public Health published the projections in the journal Science this week. The group says they used data about COVID-19 and other similar viruses to create possible scenarios. The researchers are predicting wintertime outbreaks of the virus will probably occur after this current pandemic wave.
As a society, beyond just this immediate situation, we should start looking forward to understand how this experience is going to change us, or how it should change us, because this is going to be transformative. It is going to be transformative on a personal basis, on a social basis, on a systems basis. We're never going to be the same again. We're not going to forget what happened here. The fear that we have, the anxiety that we have, that's not just going to go away. When do we get back to normal? I don't think we get back to normal. I think we get back, or we get to a new normal.
In 2016, the travel industry recorded 1.2 billion international arrivals across the globe. By 2030, that number will skyrocket to a staggering 1.8 billion, a reality that's simply unsustainable with our current travel system. Introducing the Known Traveller Digital Identity, the first end-to-end intervention to streamline the entire travel experience by enhancing the ability of authorities to get the information they need when they need it so that they can move people swiftly across borders. Enabled through 4 technologies, not only will individuals have complete control over their own personal data, but authorities can remove friction through a series of simple and secure digital touchpoints. Here's how it works. First, travellers build their known traveller profile, scanning their passports to input biographical data, capturing their unique facial and fingerprint biometrics, and building in additional traveller information like driver's licence numbers and credit card details. During airline bookings, travellers can seamlessly use their known traveller digital ID to autofill their reservations and even pay for their bookings. They can also share specific parts of their digital identity with country authorities to apply for travel authorizations such as visas or for advanced immigration and security pre-clearance, all before they've even packed their bags. Once a government authority approves a visa application or allows a border crossing, they will add an entry to a secure blockchain and provide the traveller with a digital stamp in their digital identity wallet. Whether travellers need a visa or not, sharing their known traveller profile with authorities in advance means on the day of departure, travellers can speed past the traditional immigration controls. At the airport, travellers can leverage their biometric verification across all touchpoints, from the baggage counter to the departure gate. And thanks to pre-screening, government authorities can utilise temporarily stored biometric and biographic information to quickly guide travellers to the appropriate lanes based on their pre-assigned risk level and the digital stamps in the traveller's identity wallet. In the traveller's personal data store, verified digital stamps prove to customs and border officials that other national authorities have verified the identity of the traveller. Using this trusted information, officials can effectively and efficiently assess passengers' entry details, ultimately creating shorter lines, reducing costs, and carving out more time to identify and mitigate any real risks. The Known Traveller Digital Identity also links with private companies, providing opportunities to facilitate entire itineraries, from catching an airport shuttle to unlocking a hotel room with a fingerprint. Through an advanced multi-device mobile interface, unparalleled biometrics, and an impenetrable blockchain, the system also learns with time. The more approved digital verification stamps a traveller acquires, the more credibility that individual will have on their next journey. Endless lines and excessive documents belong in the past.
China records no new domestic cases.
The media say China beat coronavirus. I don't believe what the Chinese government says, but we're told China did a better job than other countries.
As China gets a handle on this pandemic, it's a different story across the globe.
Across the globe, most of us are now social distancing. I'm recording this from my home and teleconferencing to communicate with my coworkers.
China did that.
A good part about America is that most of this is voluntary. Not so in China, where authorities have welded people into homes to keep them inside, or tied people to posts because they didn't wear a face mask. Chinese police use drones equipped with
high-resolution cameras and loudspeakers.
They shout orders to people on the street. China spies on every citizen. 200 million cameras and electronic eavesdropping let them pull together every person's political leanings and social interactions. They use that to give everyone a trust score. Your score drops if you criticize the government, play lots of video games, watch porn, or even have friends with low scores. The government punishes people with low scores by slowing their internet speed or banning them from traveling. I'm glad I don't live in China. Before the pandemic, I made this video about how China spies on people.
Facebook and Twitter are banned in China, so people use
WeChat, one of the world's most popular mobile apps.
So the government spies on that round the clock. The state also monitors the Chinese version of Amazon called Alibaba.
Alibaba is by your side 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Why should we care what the communists do? We're not in China.
You're walking to the communists voluntarily. That scares me.
Lee Schoolin came to America 30 years ago.
After I came to the United States, I thought, oh, no more politics. I'm in the land of free. I'm not worried. Then after I saw these things happen, I said, no. I said, I have to tell the American people, don't let this happen.
Here's Lee when she was 16. She survived the Great Leap Forward, the Great Famine, the Cultural Revolution. Her parents were doctors, so they and she were re-educated.
The poorer you were, the better you were. If you're illiterate, you're the best.
The repression is over. It's all better now.
The repression is not over. The control of people's mind, people's mouth, people's pen never stopped.
The social trust score is an example of that.
It is a big deal.
I would like to know that there's a trust score so I can know who's trustworthy and who's not. Sounds sort of appealing.
Yes, we do want to know who we can trust when we do business. But those are market behaviors. We don't need the government to get involved.
Still, no nationwide stay-at-home order.
But America's media say we do need government to be more involved. They interview people who say,
we need to ramp up production and have this wartime mobilization now.
Police are always ready to do more.
In Florida, checkpoints on highways. Rhode Island expanding its crackdown on drivers with out-of-state license plates. Police going door to door.
Really? Is that necessary? It's good that our government finally released its stockpile of emergency supplies and brought in the military's hospital ships. But repressive government controls like China's should not be our role model. Remember, the virus began in China and spread farther because their autocrats suppressed information and denied that the virus could spread between humans. And they punished scientists who told the truth.
They arrested the doctors who were trying to blow their whistle about this. They made them publicly retract it.
Even people who post things about the virus may be locked up. I'm glad I live in America, where I'm free to say anything I want about the virus or the government. Some American authorities will go too far. Philadelphia police pulled a man off a bus because he wouldn't wear a mask. But after this video went viral, police changed their policy. We Americans debate these issues. In China, they just lock people up. I trust that we'll get the virus under control here too. I hope, without taking away our freedom.
They're constantly monitored by facial recognition cameras that are able to instantly put a face to a name. Now, the Chinese are also ranked, given a mark out of a possible 950 points. A score in the 700s is considered good. Around the 500 mark is not. For now, the number is a sort of bank credit rating, keeping track of everyone's spending habits.
I think being ranked is a good thing.
A society has to have rules.
It forces us to be well behaved.
It may seem scary, but it's just like that here. We're used to it, and anyway, we don't have a choice.
But in an effort to keep all of its subjects in line, Beijing is taking the system a step further in 2020. It's aggregating data gathered by banks, private companies, and the state to rate if someone's a good or bad citizen.
By using the most data possible, the so-called big data, the system will play an important role in rebuilding a moral society.
The state will go over every detail of a person's life with a fine-tooth comb. Their financial situation, spending habits, career, even behavior on social media. Criticizing the government online or displaying outward signs of wealth is a no-no. On the other hand, praising the party or giving blood increases your social credit. Xiao Wen-Wang is a model citizen. She lives in Nanjing, a testing ground for social ranking. Married with a child, she has a job in a retirement home, no debts, and she wouldn't dream of jaywalking.
As a good citizen, I respect the rules of the road. If I didn't, I'd lose points on my social credit.
In theory, everything can be taken into account in the social score, even the most innocuous errands like supermarket shopping. When Xiao Wen-Wang makes an electronic payment, her purchases tell the state a lot about her. Buying cigarettes would count against her. On the other hand, nappies show she's an attentive mother. Beer could indicate alcoholism. She'd be better off buying water. In this pilot city of 8 million people, there are only 18,000 model citizens. For Xiao Wen-Wang, there are perks to be had, such as paying half price for the bus.
I get discounts for all public services, even at museums. And the library is free for me, thanks to my score.
A good score brings benefits, but people with low scores lose rights. The cinema names and shames people considered untrustworthy, plastering their details, even their addresses, across big screens.
It's a matter of principle. Those people have to be condemned.
Those people aren't honest, so they have to pay the price.
It's only right to pay your debts. You have to blacklist those that don't.
The Supreme Court has created a blacklist for so-called bad citizens, those whose ratings have dropped to zero. On it are companies, but also 23 million people to date. Among them is this journalist Liu Hu. He got a little too close to uncovering corruption among high-profile party members. After being sued for defamation by the subject of a story he'd written, he was blacklisted. He only realized when he tried to buy a train ticket and was told he was banned from traveling.
That tells me I'm still on the blacklist.
Punished because he's been branded untrustworthy by the state.
Once you're blacklisted, you can no longer get a bank loan, start a business, buy an apartment, or even send your children to a private school.
Liu Hu is among a tiny minority of people who have dared to criticize the system, which some are calling a digital dictatorship.
I worry, because I think many people like me will be deprived of individual freedoms, and all of us will live with restrictions of one kind or another.
After our meeting, Liu Hu learned that his name had been removed from the blacklist, but he still has a long way to go if he doesn't want to languish at the bottom of the social credit hierarchy.